He was the golden boy of Hollywood, every role he touched turned to gold. But in 1980, Robert Redford made a decision that would haunt him for decades. A film that promised brilliance, but delivered disappointment. On the surface, it had everything: prestige, talent, and ambition. But behind the scenes, tensions flared, creative visions clashed, and one woman in particular became the reason Redford would come to regret ever signing on. This is the untold story of the film Robert Redford wishes he'd never made, and the fallout that left a permanent mark on his legendary career. And those closest to him say it all came down to her. So what really unraveled behind the scenes? And why does Robert Redford still avoid the topic to this day? As we uncover the behind-the-curtain chaos of the movie he regrets most, we begin by tracing the roots of the man himself. Born on August 18, 1936, in Santa Monica, California, Charles Robert Redford Jr. didn't grow up in the glow of Hollywood lights. His father, once a humble milkman turned accountant, and his mother, a devoted homemaker, raised him in a modest, working-class neighborhood. Though Southern California was drenched in sunshine, Redford's early life wasn't as golden. He was a restless child, often clashing with authority and struggling to find his footing in school. That rebellious streak, however, would eventually become part of his signature charm, setting the stage for a journey that would lead him from troubled beginnings to the very top of Hollywood's elite. But even for a legend like Redford, not every chapter in his story was one he'd choose to remember. Teachers saw something special in Robert Redford early on, an intelligent mind paired with an unshakable stubborn streak. He was creative, yes, but never one to follow the rules blindly. That independence was both a gift and a curse. At the heart of his young life was his mother, who nurtured his artistic inclinations and believed in his potential. Her untimely death when he was still a teenager left a scar that never truly healed. It hardened him, silenced a part of his youthful spirit, and shaped the quiet, introspective persona that would later define him. Even in childhood, Redford felt like an outsider. That sense of not quite fitting in stayed with him and echoed through the characters he would one day portray, men who challenged authority, who operated on their own terms. In his early adult years, he leaned fully into that rebel identity. He enrolled at the University of Colorado, but the academic world couldn't hold him. Poor grades, too many parties, and a thirst for something more led him to drop out, marking the start of a wandering journey that would take him far beyond the classroom, and eventually, into legend. After leaving college behind, Robert Redford set off to Europe, a journey that awakened something deeper in him. When he returned to the U.S., he enrolled in the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, where he began taking acting seriously for the first time. Though he also studied painting at the renowned Pratt Institute, it was the stage, not the canvas, that captured his soul. Redford's early theatrical work quickly proved he had something special. His breakout moment came in the early 1960s, starring in Neil Simon's Broadway smash Barefoot in the Park. The performance wasn't just a hit, it made Redford a rising star. Audiences were drawn to his effortless charm, clean-cut good looks, and an authenticity that set him apart. His success on stage opened the floodgates to television roles, where he built a strong reputation as a dedicated, disciplined actor who brought depth to every performance. But everything changed in 1969. Redford landed the role of a lifetime, playing the Sundance Kid opposite Paul Newman in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. That one film didn't just make him a star, it cemented him as a Hollywood icon and launched a career that would span decades. He became well known because to this movie. With Newman, the combination was electrifying. Redford counterbalanced Newman's more light-hearted energy on film with a calm, silent intensity. Together, viewers adored them, and Hollywood noticed. All of a sudden, Robert Redford was a powerful force rather than just a growing star. Redford established himself in Hollywood throughout the ensuing years with a series of hit movies. He played journalist Bob Woodward in All the President's Men, The Sting with Paul Newman, and The Way We Were with Barbra Streisand. His breadth and seriousness as an actor were demonstrated by these roles. They also contributed to the public's perception of Robert Redford as the Hollywood golden boy, handsome, gifted, and naturally charming. However, the man beneath that facade was intensely control-oriented. Redford's interests extended beyond acting. He desired to be involved in every aspect of the creative process. He was meticulous about characters, screenplays, and even editing decisions. He frequently provided directors with criticism and occasionally went above and beyond. Redford occasionally suggested significant modifications that changed the overall tone of a movie or re-edit sequences himself. Some viewed this as dedication, while others thought it was overbearing or domineering. Redford's influence increased along with his notoriety. He gained notoriety for being extremely picky about his roles and co-workers. He rejected a lot of high-profile movies because he didn't trust the filmmakers or the plot. He desired to work on projects that were more than merely box office hits, they needed substance and purpose. In Hollywood, where many actors were more concerned with fame and money, this set him apart. Redford's perfectionism, though, occasionally caused arguments. Producers who attempted to rush him or alter his vision caused him to fight. Particularly from those who did not share his enthusiasm for storytelling, he disliked being told what to do. He had strong opinions and didn't hesitate to voice them, which made him challenging for some directors. It was occasionally annoying for co-stars who wanted a more relaxed, cooperative environment to work with him. Redford preferred discipline and organization on set, which wasn't always in line with other performers' preferences. Redford continued to be one of the most well-liked people in the field in spite of these difficulties. Even when people tried to pull him in different directions, he was able to keep control of his career thanks to his quiet confidence and keen intuition. He began directing as well, which allowed him even more artistic flexibility. Ordinary People, his debut feature film, was the Academy Award winner for Best Director. This demonstrated that his strong determination and meticulous attention to detail were more than just personality attributes. They contributed to his accomplishments. One of the things that made Redford so intriguing was his ability to strike a balance between his private authority and public appeal. He typically had the last word, but he was never the loudest person in the room. Even though they didn't always agree with him, his co-workers frequently expressed their appreciation for him. He had no interest in gossip or Hollywood politics. Making quality films on his own terms was his goal. Redford's success was not just due to his talent. It was about self-control, foresight, and the silent strength of knowing what you want and pursuing it. He meticulously constructed his career, avoiding scandals and maintaining his seclusion while being totally committed to the work that was important to him. However, not everyone liked his manner, and he had trouble working with some of Hollywood's biggest personalities. Love and conflict. Robert Redford has long been regarded as a quiet and contemplative individual. Although he was viewed by many as a Hollywood star who was successful, attractive, and talented, his personal life revealed a more nuanced picture. Redford has 2 marriages, and each one reveals a different aspect of him. His first marriage, which lasted for nearly 30 years, was characterized by increasing emotional tension and distance. Much later in life, his second marriage appeared more stable and tranquil. We can better understand Redford as an actor and as a person who frequently battled to strike a balance between love, fame, and his need for independence by examining these 2 marriages. In 1958, Redford wed Lola Van Wagen, his first wife. He was a young, inexperienced actor at the time, still figuring out who he was. Lola was a Utah-born Mormon who valued stability and family. She stood by his side as he put a lot of effort into developing his career, encouraged him to pursue his goals, and believed in him. Their early years of marriage were characterized by optimism and the kind of encouragement that many aspiring artists require. Together, they had 4 children, but one of them passed away when still a baby, a tragedy that profoundly touched them both. Redford was not yet the well-known actor that everyone knew at this time. He was working on stage, playing little parts, and gradually becoming well-known in the entertainment industry. Redford was able to concentrate on his business because Lola took care of the majority of the household duties, including raising the kids. It appeared to be a fruitful collaboration. He was creating something huge, and she was his foundation. However, as Redford's notoriety increased in the late 1960s and early 1970s, things started to shift. Everything in his life changed in 1969 when he became a major star because to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Film sets, media attention, social gatherings, and fresh prospects all drew him in at once. Redford became one of the most well-known faces in the world, but Lola remained out of the spotlight. They were separated by the strain of celebrity. Redford's concentration on his work increased. He had a reputation for giving every endeavor his whole attention. He put his all into everything he did, whether it was producing, directing, or acting. Long hours and extended periods of time away from home were frequently required for this degree of attention. His emotional support system, Lola, began to fade into the background of his hectic life. Despite staying married for years, they were emotionally estranged. Rumors about Redford's infidelity also circulated. Although he rarely responded to these accusations in public, some of his intimate associates implied that it was hard to remain totally dedicated because of Hollywood's reputation, frequent travel, and temptation. Redford also became more emotionally distant during this period. Much though he was already a private person, he grew much more so over these years. Even with people who were close to him, he disliked talking about personal issues. According to reports, Lola felt this distancing, and their relationship suffered as a result. Redford and Lola were married for 27 years before divorcing in 1985. There was no public drama and the separation was civil and calm. Lola went on to concentrate on her own work in historical and environmental study, while Redford kept up his privacy protections. The marriage had come to a stage where they required different things, despite the fact that they had spent many years together and raised a family. Redford fell in love again years later, but this time it was very different. He met German-born artist Cyle Zagers in the middle of the 1990s, who shared his passion for the arts and the natural world. Their relationship started out slowly and in silence. Redford handled things more slowly this time, in contrast to the hectic life he had led in his younger years. Before getting married in 2018, they shared a home for more than 20 years. Redford seemed to fit in well with Sybyl's exclusion from the Hollywood scene. She had a job as a painter and was serene and creative. Their slower pace of life, common ideals, and respect for one another formed the foundation of their partnership. Redford had distanced himself from the spotlight by this time in his life. He was spending more time at his Utah ranch, picking ventures more carefully, and concentrating on environmental issues. Sybil encouraged this style of living, and the two of them established a calm routine that provided Redford with the seclusion he had always desired. A lot of observers observed that Redford appeared more comfortable in their second collaboration. There was more emotional equilibrium, less public scrutiny, and less strain. His second marriage showed a guy who had already accomplished his aims and now desired serenity, whereas his first marriage was characterized by the vigor and drive of a man establishing his profession. Sybil supplied that, and they have maintained a solid and enduring friendship. Even while he eventually found some peace in his personal life, not all of his business connections were easy, and he had some of his most heated arguments with Hollywood's biggest stars. Against Redford, Paul Newman. One of Hollywood's most cherished on-screen collaborations was formed by Robert Redford and Paul Newman. In Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, their relationship was innate, endearing, and vivacious. Viewers enjoyed seeing them interact with one another. The calm, self-assured Newman beside the more reserved, solemn Redford. Despite their differences as actors, they were a fantastic match. On screen, their friendship appeared natural, and the movie's popularity made them one of the most recognizable pairs in cinematic history. They collaborated once more on The Sting, another huge smash, a few years later. In addition to winning numerous Academy Awards, it demonstrated Redford and Newman's unique talent. For a while, the two were close in real life, as fans and critics believed. They had a sincere regard for one another and relished their initial collaboration. During filming, they even pulled practical jokes on one another and made fun of their disparate acting styles. Everything appeared to be going well on the surface, but there were early indications of stress behind the scenes. Redford grew increasingly involved in the artistic aspects of filmmaking and more guarded of his reputation as his stardom began to grow. He wanted a say in how things were done, not merely to act. By the 1960s, however, Newman had already established himself as a great star and was accustomed to top billing and leading parts. There was a silent dispute about whose name should be shown in the credits when Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were released. Although Redford's performance elevated the film and many thought he should have received equal credit, Newman received the highest billing. A competitive dynamic between the two was established at that point. Redford's passion in directing and creative control only intensified when the 1970s rolled around. Acting roles were not all he desired. He wanted to influence the entire narrative, not simply contribute to it. But Newman had always been the focal point of his endeavors. He was seasoned, self-assured, and accustomed to taking charge. They began to drift apart quietly as a result of their divergent perspectives on their respective jobs in Hollywood. Redford and Newman collaborated less and less, despite the fact that there was no open conflict. They didn't work together again on a movie. Their relationship got more formal, despite supporters' hopes that they would do so behind closed doors. Although they continued to express mutual affection and praise for one another in interviews, they no longer spent as much time together as they had in their younger years. Redford once acknowledged that as their paths diverged due to job and life, they drifted apart. After Newman passed away in 2008, Redford later paid tribute to him, describing him as a wonderful friend and a talented actor. The closeness they had shared gradually changed into a more respectable, aloof relationship, yet it was evident that the respect never diminished. Their collaboration produced two iconic movies for the world. However, the friendship itself did not endure as long. We'll then examine Redford's more acerbic conflict with Jack Nicholson, a totally different kind of co-star. Opposition to Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson and Robert Redford were two of Hollywood's most well-known figures of the 1970s. Despite being both powerful men, they couldn't have been more dissimilar. Redford was renowned for being composed, well-mannered, and in charge. Nicholson was noisy, untamed, and erratic. There was obviously tension between them, even if they were never open adversaries. Behind the scenes, their personalities, acting philosophies, and approaches to filmmaking clashed. A silent rivalry that persisted for years was the outcome. When both performers were vying for the lead part in The Great Gatsby in the early 1970s, it was a significant event that demonstrated their rivalry. The role of Jay Gatsby was a highly sought-after part in the movie, which was based on the well-known novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Although Redford ultimately won the part, Nicholson was also given careful consideration. Some reports claim that Redford, who Nicholson felt was too stiff or emotionless for the role, won the gig, frustrating Nicholson. Their developing separation was exacerbated by this. However, Redford had a negative opinion of Nicholson's conduct both on and off the set. Redford favored a concentrated, business-like setting. He enjoyed planning, practicing, and following through. He expected others to be as serious as he was, and he didn't like surprises on set. Nicholson's strategy was very different. He flourished amid disorder. He enjoyed improvising, switching lines, and abruptly altering the tone of a scene. This made him fascinating and new to certain filmmakers. Redford, however, thought it was chaotic and unmanageable. The fact that Nicholson frequently made hurtful remarks behind the scenes didn't help. People close to Nicholson claim that he once labeled Redford wooden in private chats, despite the fact that the two actors never collaborated directly on a big-budget movie. He frequently poked fun of Redford's somber, reserved demeanor and felt that his manner lacked emotional depth. Redford was known to avoid performers who made fun of him, even in private, even though he didn't publicly address these remarks. In actuality, Redford and Nicholson portrayed two rather different kinds of actors in the same time period. Redford performed best in films with a lot of structure and meticulous planning. He appreciated subtlety and accuracy. Nicholson enjoyed freedom, emotion, and turmoil. His most prominent parts, such as those in The Shining and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, were dramatic and occasionally outrageous. It was difficult for Redford to be around that kind of energy. Depending on the tone they desired, directors and producers frequently choose one or the other for projects. The quiet force with depth and charm was Redford. Nicholson was the unpredictable, fearless spark. They were unlikely to ever get along because of these disparities, and ultimately they never did. Throughout their careers, the two stayed apart, frequently circling the same parts and projects but never ending up on the same set. Redford might have steered clear of confrontation. However, he had no qualms about turning down actors he couldn't collaborate with, including Nicholson. We'll then examine Redford's quiet confrontation with Gene Hackman, another powerful actor. Gene Hackman and Robert Redford. Among the most renowned actors of their time were Gene Hackman and Robert Redford. They were both talented, diligent, and very committed to their profession. However, their personalities and morals couldn't have been more dissimilar. They never collaborated on a significant project, although living in the same time period and frequently receiving comparable recognition. It wasn't a coincidence. It boiled down to a simple personality conflict and a shared disinterest in interacting with one another. Known for his cool and collected demeanor, Redford frequently maintained a professional distance when working on set. He lacked emotional depth in both his performing and personal relationships. In contrast, Hackman gave each role he played a certain raw intensity. His intense, occasionally violent energy made his performances impactful, but it could also make him challenging to deal with. Hackman's intensity was apparently a bit too much for Redford. He believed that both on and off camera, Hackman could be harsh and erratic. Redford also didn't impress Hackman. He frequently chastised Hollywood's elite for their phony charm. Hackman came from a working-class historical past and took delight in his rougher, extra-grounded picture. He did not consider actors who regarded too polished or too concerned with reputation. In interviews, Hackman by no means called Redford out at once, however human beings near him said he viewed Redford as remote, maybe even conceited. He as soon as described sure actors as being cold and controlling, and it turned into extensively believed that Redford become one of the humans he had in thoughts. The two had possibilities to work together over time. Redford reportedly presented Hackman roles in a few of his very own directing initiatives, consisting of A River Runs Through It and Quiz Display. Hackman turned them down. He failed to sense cozy operating beneath Redford's management and did not like the tone of the projects. Hackman desired gritty, emotionally extreme roles. Whilst Redford's films often leaned towards quiet, thoughtful storytelling, their tastes did not healthy, and their running patterns had been in reality too specific. Hackman also had a robust dislike for what he known as the Hollywood elite. He failed to revel in award shows, networking, or public appearances. Redford, even though greater non-public than maximum stars, was nevertheless a prime figure in Hollywood circles. He had his own movie competition, had received Oscars, and had close ties to effective human beings within the industry. Hackman idea all of that felt out of touch and synthetic. For him, Redford turned into the image of an industry he didn't need to fully be part of. Despite all this, there was never a public argument among them. Redford not often commented on Hackman, and Hackman stayed typically silent as well. However, the ones within the enterprise knew that the two didn't mix. They reputable every difference paintings from a distance, but they'd no interest in working together. It wasn't approximately one event or one confrontation. It turned into simply a case of robust-minded individuals who didn't connect. The 1980 film he regrets. Robert Redford and Barbara Streisand shared one of the maximum iconic romantic pairings in film history. However, behind the curtain of The Manor We Were, their operating dating became far from heat. The film instructed the tale of opposites, a political activist and a laid-back creator falling in and out of affection. On screen, their chemistry changed into plain. Off-screen, but, matters had been worrying, cold, and complex. Their professional conflict turned into no longer explosive in a dramatic manner, but it became deep and long-lasting. It left a mark on both of them and defined why they in no way worked together once more regardless of public call for a reunion. Redford was now not the primary preference for the function of Hubble Gardner. Barbara Streisand, who turned into already closely involved in the improvement of the movie, desired him from the beginning. She believed Redford became the simplest actor who should fit her on display and make the love story feel authentic. However, Redford wasn't right now fascinated. In fact, he turned into hesitant. He involved that the movie might become too focused on Streisand, who turned into recognized now not most effective for her skills, but also for her robust personality and manage over her projects. Redford didn't want to be visible as a secondary person in a film that felt like it is probably a vanity assignment. Subsequently, he agreed to take the role, but handiest after sure conditions have been met. One of these conditions, according to some reports, become that components of the script be revised. Redford didn't suppose the man or woman of Hubble become completely evolved. He wanted extra depth, more display time, and a more potent emotional arc. It is stated that he worked with author Arthur Lawrence to rewrite numerous scenes so the tale felt extra balanced between the two characters. Streisand agreed, as a minimum publicly, but the foundation for tension turned into already there. At some point of filming, the divide among their tactics became even extra apparent. Streisand poured herself into the position, regularly pushing for more emotional scenes and dramatic moments. She appreciated to improvise lines and try specific emotional tones during takes. Redford, via contrast, favored to paste to the script. He appreciated manage and subtlety. He didn't enjoy doing scenes time and again with different emotional extremes. To him, the power of the movie came from its quiet, understated parts, not from emotional outbursts or grand performances. This distinction in style led to friction. Redford reportedly determined Streisand arduous to paintings with. He famous her skills, however he disliked how a lot manipulate she tried to have over the movie. He notioned she will be self-absorbed and stressful. Streisand in turn concept Redford become too distant and bloodless. She said he often shut her out and did not interact with her in emotional scenes the way she hoped he might. Their communique become confined and their connection off-screen was minimum. People who labored at the film defined their courting as cordial at first class and brittle at worst. They had been now not overtly adverse, however there was no warmth among them. They stayed professional, hit their marks, and added strong performances, but there was no friendship at the back of the digicam. Their simplest actual connection seemed to appear whilst the cameras had been rolling. As soon as the scene turned into over, they went their separate ways. In spite of all this, The Way We Have Been have become a huge success. Audiences cherished the movie, and many believed the emotional tension they saw on display screen changed into the end result of deep private chemistry. In fact, it became the end result of two robust-willed professionals who had been barely able to paintings together, however pushed through to deliver a film that resonated with human beings around the world. Refusal to reunite. After the success of The Way We Were in 1973, many human beings predicted Barbara Streisand and Robert Redford to reunite for every other film. Their on-display screen chemistry was unforgettable, and audiences have been eager to look them collectively once more. For Streisand, it wasn't just about public demand. She without a doubt believed that the magic they had created should show up once more. At some point of the 80s and 1990s, she pushed for a sequel to The Way We Were or for a new romantic mission with Redford. She felt there has been more story to inform and extra emotional ground to explore among their characters or in a distinct putting. Streisand actively attempted to get Redford on board. She labored with writers, pitched thoughts, or even attempted to transform some scripts to healthy each in their strengths. However, on every occasion she reached out, Redford declined. He in no way gave harsh rejections, however he made it clear that he wasn't involved. In several interviews over time, Redford gave the identical reaction. One movie was sufficient. It wasn't non-public, he insisted. He truly felt the unique film said the entirety it wished to say. To Streisand even though, it become private. She had poured so much of herself into The Way We Were. Both the performance and the at the back of the scenes improvement. She felt a deep emotional connection to the tale and to Redford's character. His refusal to work together with her again harmed her, and she later admitted it. In a 2016 interview, Strerian stated she became dissatisfied and wounded with the aid of his unwillingness to reunite. She admitted she in no way truly understood what went wrong. To her, the partnership had worked fantastically. Redford, however, noticed the enjoy vary in a different way. He determined operating with Steris and laborious. Even as he reputable her talent and her dedication, he felt crushed with the aid of her emotional depth. He stated in interviews that he failed to need to go through that enjoy once more. Redford was a private individual, a person who valued calm manage, and quiet attention on set. Strand brought emotion, spontaneity, and a totally strong presence that made their film brilliant, however it made their running courting extraordinarily tough. Despite all of the anxiety, each Strerian and Redford continually spoke respectfully about each other's work. They by no means badmouthed each other in public. Strerian often praised Redford's appearing capability, calling him ideal for the role of Hubble and particularly natural. Redford in turn referred to as Sterison gifted and stated she brought effective emotion to the display screen. Professionally, they popular one another, but that appreciate came with clear emotional barriers. In case you love this look at the real drama at the back of the screen, consider to love, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you in no way omit extra untold stories from Hollywood's golden page.